was at this point that the Chinese clean sweep seemed inevitable. He Jiting and Ren Xiangyu were cruising, playing at a speed 1 or 2 levels higher than their Malaysian opponents. Would they go on to win and secure the clean sweep for China? The first clean sweep at a tournament of this level in a decade, not seen since the Denmark Super Series premiere in 2014. Well, I'll come back to that later, as before we even got to finals day at the China Open, there was plenty of stuff that went down. Plenty of stuff that I have to talk about. Welcome everyone to the second episode in my new series, Beckman's Breakdown. This week is the final Super 1000 of the year, the China Open. So yeah, let's get into it, starting with something that happened before even the first shuttle was struck. As I expected, there were a number of draws from big names at this year's China Open. Se Seung-jae and Cha Yu-jung, Watanabe and Higashino, as well as Zheng Siwei and Wang Yachong in the mixed doubles. But there was another huge withdrawal. A withdrawal that came with it a number of theories attached. I'm talking about the withdrawal of the Olympic women's singles champion and world number 1 An Se-young. The reason I believe An Se-young withdrew from this China Open is because she hasn't fully recovered from the injuries that she sustained in the build-up to the Paris Olympics. However, what a number of people started hypothesizing online was that An Se-young's withdrawal had something to do with the comments that she made against the Korean Badminton Association after she won the Olympic gold. Well, I say comments, it was more like harsh criticisms. Criticisms which have sparked an investigation into how things are done within the Korean Badminton Association. But whilst this does make a rather good story, I don't think it holds much weight. I generally believe that An Se-young is simply not fit enough. Either her injuries are still healing, or they have, but she now requires more time to get back to full fitness. And if that is the case, then I am very happy to hear that. I am happy because she is looking at her career with a far wider lens. If An Se-young can return to full fitness, then there's no reason to believe that she can't dominate in the same way that she did before her injury. And if that happens, then we could see her not just winning more majors, but setting records in the process. Whilst I'm on the topic of An Se-young, there was an update from the BKA following the initial investigation into how the organisation has been run. And there's 3 main things that have come from it. 1, they have abolished the rule which currently only allows national team athletes to play internationally. 2, there are talks of them abolishing the rule that requires players to obey the coach's orders. And lastly, it is suspected that BKA President Kim Taek-gyu has embezzled funds to the sum of 140 million won. That's over £100,000. That's 3 pretty big developments, but I don't think they had anything to do with An Se-young's withdrawal from the China Open. Okay, the title for this section is a little on the nose, but let me explain. It's no secret that for pretty much the whole of this year so far, Tai Tzu-ying has been severely struggling with injuries. But recently, she has been really struggling, with a number of rather surprising losses to players who, I mean no disrespect to, but a fully fit Tai Tzu-ying would simply walk all over them. With an example of this being at this China Open, as she lost to the 4th ranked Danish player Julie de Waal Jacobsen. It's results like this that is making me think of the question in the title for this section. Should Tai Tzu-ying retire now? Tai has already made it quite publicly known that she will be retiring at the end of 2024. But with all these injury issues, ones that mean she can only play at like 10% of her level, it makes me wonder why she keeps playing. Even this week in China, she turned up to play, even though the following week in Hong Kong, she withdrew at the beginning of one of her matches. Tai Tzu-ying has nothing left to prove. She has won so much in the game of badminton, and she has wowed us over a decade with her amazing skills, deceptions, and graceful way of playing. So I don't think anyone is going to think any less of her if she speeds up her retirement by just a few months. On top of this, I do worry that playing on injuries that are clearly severe could have more long-term repercussions for Tai Tzu Ying. Honestly, it's quite heartbreaking to see such a player continue, battling on and on despite these injury issues. I do commend her heart for trying to carry on, but I do sincerely hope that she puts her health first. Retiring earlier than said, forced out by injuries, would be such a sad end to a player with such an illustrious career. But to me, that's a better choice than what's currently happening. I wish Tai Tzu Ying nothing but the best. You don't see this happen all too often, but in the men's singles at a Super 1000, the world number 1, 2, 3 and 4 were all knocked out before the end of the second round. These surprise results did rest on some injury issues, circumstance, and their opponents, but each has their individual story or area that I wish to talk about. I'll start with the result that garnered the least amount of attention, and that was world number 4 Li Shi Feng falling in the opening round to Chou Chen. Now this result is the least surprising because Li Shi Feng is a bit of a hot and cold player. He hasn't been having the best of forms recently, and the player that he lost to is an incredibly well-established one. In fact, he is a former world number 2 and has won a Super 1000 before. The reason I bring it up though is not because the world number 4 crashed in the opening round, nor was it because it was a continuation of some recent poor form. No, I bring it up because I was under the impression that after the Paris Olympics, Li Shi Feng was going to take some time out to sort out the issue he's been having with his feet. In fact, I thought it was going to be something that required surgery. Maybe he was forced to play, or maybe the issue isn't actually that severe, although that's the impression that I was given. If anyone knows, then please do let me know in the comments. Right, that's the least interesting one out of the way. For the next 3, I'm splitting them into their own sections. Then I'm going to come back and give some roundabout thoughts. Heading into the Paris Olympics, Shi Yu Qi was one of the hot favourites. In fact, it's probably truer to say that he was the hot favourite. He'd been on an incredible roll, winning numerous tournaments, fighting through tough matches, looking supremely confident, and he'd also taken the world number 1 spot from Viktor Axelsen. But this didn't manifest as he lost rather comfortably in the quarter-finals at those Olympics to Vititzan. This loss must have been devastating for him, as it would be for any player, and if I'm honest, I half expected him to take some time away. That didn't happen though. In fact, the opposite happened, as Shi Yu Qi jumped almost immediately into tournaments. It was clear though that this probably wasn't the best of things, as Shi Yu Qi looked unfocused, unmotivated, and if I'm honest, just apathetic in his way of playing. And that shows in his results, as if you compare his results from before the Olympics to now, then it's like night and day. And this spilled over into this week's China Open, as he lost in the second round to Anthony Ginting 21-11, 21-8. His performance in that match was the worst I had seen of him since the Olympics. He really looked like he didn't want to be on court. Yes, there were some calls for the doctor to come on court, but in all honesty, his heart just didn't seem in it. This was confirmed in his post-match interview, where not only did he state he has been struggling with an injury, something which can make it even difficult to go to the toilet at night, but that he also wasn't sure if he wishes to continue playing badminton. This was compounded by the fact right now he has no big goal in mind. To me, this is not just a simple overnight thing, or a reaction to his loss in China. It has been building ever since his loss in Paris, and with that in mind, I am a little surprised that the China team sent him to these tournaments. I would have felt that taking some time off to both physically and mentally recover and reset would have been a far better thing for him to do. At least then, Shi Yu Qi would be able to make the most rational decision on the future of his sport, one that is best for him.
I was given this, and my nothing is.
I'm going to come out and say this right off the bat. On September 18th, I, Ben Beckman, was made to eat my words. In the first episode of Beckman's Breakdown, I said that Lei Shi didn't have the weaponry to fluster and hurt Viktor Axelsen.
He's done it.
I was just a bit wrong. Well, actually, I must say there are some differences here, with chief amongst them being that a first round compared to a final is completely different. I also do stand by what I said. Lei Shi is not super fast, super skillful, or possesses a monstrous attack. However, he showed to me, and many others, that he has other skills and attributes that he's able to use. Lei Shi came in with a new game plan, was incredibly solid in stroke play, and he also played the conditions far better than Viktor. Lei Shi most certainly learnt a number of lessons from his first match with Viktor, and he used those lessons to get his win. It must be said he was also helped by Viktor, as Viktor looked incredibly unsettled on court. He was visibly nervous and on edge, snatching shots in a lot of situations, as well as overcommitting coming forward, almost running into the shuttle at times. Now, there might be an explanation for all of this, because due to the stormy weather, Viktor Axelsen didn't arrive in China until 8 PM the day before his match, and then, instead of being given an evening match, he was put on in the afternoon. Clearly not the best preparation for a tournament, and I feel that this kind of situation might affect Viktor more, as he strikes me as the kind of person who needs things to be in place. There's no doubting that this would have had an effect on Viktor's ability to put in his best performance. But still, this shouldn't take anything away from Lei Shi, who played a very solid match and was a very deserved winner. And it must be said that this is the exact thing that Viktor Axelsen himself acknowledged.
First of all, I think Lei Shi, he played a fantastic game, so all credit to him. He played way better than I did. We played on Sunday, as you said. We had a little bit of challenges coming here. I arrived yesterday evening around 8 o'clock in the evening. I think, so there's been a little bit of challenge for both of us, I guess. So it would have been great with an evening match for both, but for some reason we should play in the middle of the afternoon, which is very interesting. So, but all in all, I think that no excuses from here. Lei Shi was the better player. He deserves all the credit, and I hope he will have a great weekend.
On Tuesday morning, as I was making my coffee and getting ready for my day, as I often do when big tournaments are on, I checked tournament software to see what results had gone on. And to begin with, it was kind of the usual results, nothing too out of the ordinary. Until I came across this score. For a minute, I thought I had misread it. Then I thought my eyes were funny, but no, Lee Zii Jia really did lose 21-2 in the second game. I checked the match stats to see if I could make sense of it, but that didn't really help. Then I took to YouTube to try and find some highlights of the match. I just had to know what had gone on. Highlights which I found and watched, following which I posted this to Instagram. Now, since watching it for the first time, I've watched it several more times, and I also listened to a post-match interview given by Lee Zii Jia. This interview does provide some answers, as well as giving a little more context to what happened on court. However, to me, it doesn't explain everything. What Lee Zii Jia said is that following the Olympics, he's been struggling with some weird injuries.
I haven't spoken to media about this. I mean, after Olympics, to be honest, my body condition is quite weird and a lot of injuries coming on.
Zii Jia added that any time he trained with some intensity, he would get odd pains in areas like his knee, his back, and his elbow.
Like I said, it's weird, and once, I train with some intensity, it will get soreness everywhere, and yeah, like I said, it's weird, it's everywhere. His elbow, his knee, is the back is getting stiff, so yeah.
Now, if Lee Zii Jia is carrying these injuries, then it could explain his poor performance. He did look incredibly sluggish on court, something not helped by the fact Koki Watanabe is very good at playing the big court game. However, I'm not sure that can account for how he lost so badly. To sum it up, there was a common sentiment felt by most people that watched it, and that was that Lee Zii Jia's demeanour on court wasn't the best. And that wasn't just felt by his haters, by the way. I know that a large number of his fans felt the same way too. For me, my initial thoughts that I posted after my first viewing didn't really change the more times I watched it. He looked sluggish, he made many wild errors, his defense looked vulnerable, and he didn't put up much of a fight. Knowing that Zii Jia was carrying injuries did make me more sympathetic. And I must consider, as I did with Shi Yu Qi, that Lee Zii Jia might also be in a post-Olympic slump. Zii Jia did come away with the bronze, a medal at least, but his goals were far loftier, so he could very well still come away feeling a little lost and empty. However, considering Lee Zii Jia himself felt he was okay enough to play, and he also has big goals for the near future, then I'm not surprised that there was some backlash to his demeanour on court. Now, I do want to end this little mini section positively. So what I'm going to say is that I hope that Lee Zii Jia can work out what these injuries are, what's causing them, and then subsequently get the proper treatment and get back to his full fighting form. If he wants to make the World Tour Finals, as is his goal,
I have to get back to 100% condition to qualify for the World Tour final as well. Yeah.
Then hopefully in time for the European Tour in a few weeks. But if it takes longer than that, then so be it. Now, I said I'd come back and give some roundabout thoughts, but if I'm honest, all I could think about when I saw these results was something that's been talked about within the badminton community for quite some time now. It's always brought up whenever injuries or mental health is a factor, and that is that players need to be looked after better. It's for that reason, combined with the fact that they are the world governing body, that the BWF bears the brunt of the criticism. And that's going to be the case here. That's not to say federations, coaches, and the players themselves could do more. But really, until the BWF take heed of this issue and do something about it, there's not much that those guys can do. I want to say outright that I think the fact there are so many tournaments to play is actually a good thing. It gives so many opportunities to players of all levels. However, currently there are rules in place that state that the top 15 in singles and top 10 in doubles must play a certain number of tournaments, with that number being at least 12. 2 Super 500s, all 6 Super 750s, and all 4 Super 1000s. They must also play the World Tour Finals if they qualify, and on top of that there's a minimum of 2 majors every year. This also doesn't include continental championships, so if we add it up, that's potentially 16 tournaments a year. 12 or 13 are mandatory, and the others might as well be. Now, before I go on, these rules were put in place to ensure that the top tier of tournaments maintained their consistency and level. On top of this, there's quite a hefty financial burden put on the federations running the tournament, so of course they don't want to make a loss. In the past, there were top tournaments that for whatever reason weren't able to always attract the top players, so this ruling was a workaround for that. For me though, this is a way of thinking that needs to change. If a tournament can't consistently attract the world's best for whatever reason, then it just needs to be demoted. The players must be put first, and for that to happen I feel they need to have autonomy in decision making when it comes to which tournaments they play. It's in their interest to do so, and let's be honest, what top player isn't going to want to play all the Super 750s and all the Super 1000s? They have the biggest prize money, they have the biggest world ranking points, so it makes sense that they're going to play them. There is no need, in my eyes, to force them to do so. And what's funny to me is that whilst this rule was initially put in place to maintain consistency, it's actually had the opposite effect. As far more often than that should be the case, players are turning up to these events tired, burnt out, and carrying injuries. I'm not sure about you, but I'd much rather see the top players less, but when I do see them, they come in fresh, firing on all cylinders, and highly motivated. Injuries will undoubtedly happen. Badminton is an incredibly physical sport that's tough on the body, but there needs to be a way to minimise this. And for me, an obvious solution is to give autonomy to the players and get rid of this rule that requires them to play these tournaments. And I feel that as a nice little bonus, it'll improve badminton as a whole. What do you think? So back to where this whole video began, the final on Sunday. He Jiting and Ren Xiangyu were in the driving seat. The Chinese clean sweep was looking most likely. Well, of course, most of you watching are badminton fans, so you already know what happened. The short answer being, no. China didn't do the clean sweep. Go Zhifei and Ne Izudin were able to come back from a game down to take the China Open Super 1000, and in the process not just stop China's clean sweep, but also become the first Malaysian men's doubles pair to win the China Open in 35 years. But with that last point in mind, are you not surprised that Go and Ne didn't celebrate more? Let's compare this to their celebration after their semi-final win.
There it is. And the third. And this time they convert.
Quite the difference. And that was mainly because a huge factor in their win was an unfortunate injury to Ren Xiangyu at the end of the first game. This injury to Ren's back did flatten out the match a little bit, but it also led to a small controversy. As after the first game ended, the doctor was called to court, albeit a little late. He administered some cooling spray, but nothing else. All pretty standard. However, then something bizarre happened. The Chinese team physio entered the court and began administering treatment. Like, proper treatment. Even Jill and Steen were flabbergasted by this because this is simply not allowed, as a player can only be assessed as to whether or not they can continue, not receive extensive treatment. On top of this, the umpire had already called 20 seconds by the time the physio came onto court, meaning the players had to return to court to start the game. What really confuses me is that the head tournament referee was there, as always when a medical timeout is called, yet he did nothing. Had the match gone in the favour of the Chinese, then I feel there would have been much more of an uproar. But just the fact that this was allowed didn't sit well with a number of people. It must be said, I don't think this was tactical. Ren Xiangyu was clearly injured, but still it was against current rules. Rules I really do think the BWF need to look at. Anyway, aside from this, and some other things like a line call and a net fault going in favour of the Chinese, like I said, this final did go rather flat. Yeah, it did go close, but that was mainly because the Malaysians were being too nice. This explains why when they won there was no big celebration, even though this win was by far their biggest. A win that, although some may argue is only due to Ren's injury, shouldn't be belittled, because I thought they were excellent throughout the week. So yeah, a rather strange end to the China Open. A shame, really. However, what more than made up for it was the other finals, with plenty to talk about with them. And seeming as this video up until now has been predominantly negative, I'm going to stick with the positives. They might have not done the clean sweep, but China still came out victorious in 4 out of the 5 disciplines. An impressive feat, maybe even more so by the fact that aside from Fang Yangzi and Wang Dongping in the mixed doubles, all their winners came from players who didn't qualify for the Olympics. They were China's 3rd or 4th ranked players. But starting with Feng Yanzi and Wang Dongping, they were able to win their first ever Super 1000 event. Quite surprising that's the case when they are the world number 2s. In fact, this was their first ever Super 1000 final. It did seem like the pressure on Feng's shoulders was going to get to him. For a game and a half, he looked a little out of sorts, with the Malaysians focusing a lot of their shots and attack on him. But credit where credit's due, Feng Yanzi was able to settle down and get himself into the match. He stepped up in the mid-court and played with positivity, and when this was combined with his huge height, it became too much for the Malaysians to handle. In the third game, the Chinese were always on the attack, their clear strong point, and it did really become a one-sided final game. There was a last-minute comeback by Sun Wat and Chavon, but it was too little too late. Now, I have always been a little critical of this Chinese pair, especially Feng Yanzi, with me mainly pointed towards his inability to handle pressure. And whilst I stand by that statement, it doesn't mean that I don't think that he's a great player. When he is on it, like he was for pretty much a game and a half in this final, he is very good, making use of his power and height. I wonder if getting a big win like this is going to help him in the future pressure situations. I would be a little remiss at this point not to quickly mention their opponents from the final, Go Sun Wat and Siobhan Jamie Lai. They had the week of their lives. I was especially impressed by Go Sun Wat, who was playing the kind of badminton I'd never seen from him before. Fantastic stuff by this pair, and a huge congrats on probably your biggest success so far in your career. In both singles finals it was China versus Japan, and in both finals it was the Chinese players' attack that proved decisive. Wang Zii is often compared to Chen Yufei, the former Olympic champion, and this is because structurally they do look rather similar. But one difference, which Steen Pedersen pointed out during the final, is that Wang Ziyi's attack has that little more sting to it, and she used that to great effect in her final against Tomoka Miyazaki, especially her cross-court smash from her around the head corner, and in the second game she added punch clears into the mix, a tactic which exhausted Miyazaki. Wang Ziyi really did control the whole match, showing her class as a player, and also showing the reason why I feel she is the next to take the crown as top Chinese women's singles player. Wang Hongyan is sometimes also compared to another Chinese player, although this one isn't a current one, although that player's name is still not too far from everyone's lips. I am talking about the legend, the GOAT, Lin Dan. Well, wait, actually, maybe it's just me that's making this comparison. Regardless, this comparison is mainly down to the fact that Wang Hongyan is left-handed and likes to play within a very attacking style. Of course, in general, the similarities between the two do end there, but in this final and week as a whole, Wang Hongyan also showed that ability to win and deliver a big performance on home soil. In the final, he was helped a little by his opponent, Kodai Naraoka, as I felt at the midway point of the second game, Kodai had a real chance to change the momentum around. Wang Hongyan was looking a little tired, and with him still being 10 points away from winning, I felt because the finish line was still a little bit out of sight that he was feeling that fatigue a little bit more. If he couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, then if Kodai could simply put in even more harder and faster rallies, then the momentum could shift. However, instead of doubling down and doing just that, Kodai gifted a couple of cheap points. This allowed Wang Hongyan to sense the finishing line, in turn giving him that second wind, which he used to resume his attacking game and close it out. For me, the ability of Wang Hongyan is all too obvious, but for whatever reason he isn't able to deliver these performances consistently. Now, this is something that is plaguing the majority of men's singles these days, and maybe it can be attributed to the greater strength and depth of the men's singles. But with what he showed me this week, Wang Hongyan certainly has the ability to set himself apart at the top. It was two great wins for the Chinese players, but their Japanese opponents, Tomoka and Kodai, whilst they must have been disappointed, I feel there are some great positives to take away. Tomoka's is rather obvious. At just 18 years old, reaching a Super 1000 final was huge, and only cements what I said of her last week. All week she controlled the conditions very nicely, and showed that she can adapt her style to any opponent, a quality that will serve her well in years to come. For Kodai, I am noticing a shift in his style of play, trying to implement more of an attacking and proactive style. He is very fast, has great retrieving abilities, and is also insanely fit. Important skills to have in men's singles, that's no doubt, but I feel that Kodai has relied too heavily on these, and in the long term I don't think it's sustainable. I feel Kodai understands this and has been trying to make this change over the last few months, even before the Olympics, but as it isn't his natural game it is taking some time. If he can continue to develop this, especially within his attacking accuracy and his front court follow-ups, then combined with all the other attributes I just named, then he could become a truly dangerous player. This year's China Open Super 1000 sure was an interesting one. It had all of the hallmarks that you'd expect. Some great stuff, some bad stuff, and of course some controversial stuff. Talking of which, I just know that there's going to be comments below this video talking about Weng Hongyang and his unsportsmanlike behaviour. And this is because of what happened in his semi-final match with Jonathan Christie. Namely, the moment where the shuttle deflected off Weng Hongyang's racket at 14-11 in the first game. So I might as well address it with my own thoughts. Yes, the shuttle did deflect off Weng Hongyang's racket. There's no denying that. But I am not so sure, as many have said to me over Instagram, that this was the reason why Jonathan Christie lost. Could the umpire have overruled it? Yeah, of course. Although that never happens. Do we need reviews in this sort of situation? That definitely needs to be discussed. Mainly, more importantly, should Weng Hongyang have admitted to it? Well, to that I have kind of 2 points. One, it's uncertain whether Weng Hongyang actually felt the shuttle deflect off his racket. I know it did look like quite a rather large deflection, but sometimes when you're in the speed of that moment, you don't actually feel it. And anyway, it's not up to him, it is up to the umpire to call it. And secondly, I can remember when I interviewed Hans Christian Vittinghus for the video I did on him, and I asked him about the whole net kill situation with Lee Chuk Yu at one of the tournaments in 2020 in Thailand. And Vittinghus said to me...
But yeah, that doesn't matter anyway. Even if I had knew 100% certain, I'm not sure I would have given it, because I think for myself that he would never give it to me. And it was a huge moment in the match, maybe at 0-0 or 2-2 in the first game, maybe, but it's too important of a point, and again, it's the umpire's call.
And that's quite an interesting way of looking at it. If it had been flipped, and it was Weng Hongyang who had killed it at Christie and it deflected off his racket, yet it wasn't called, would Jonathan Christie had admitted to it and given the point to his opponent? Now, of course, you can't say yes or no, but the simple fact that there's some doubt there means that you should give a little bit of benefit to the doubt to Weng Hongyang. Like I also said, making these decisions is solely up to the umpire. All in all, of course, it was a sour moment, and I completely understand why people react in the way that they did. This sort of thing does happen way too often, and the solution on the surface seems incredibly simple. But having said that, in this particular case, I'm not sure whether you can attribute what happened at 14-11 to Jonathan Christie losing the overall match. Another thing that happened during the China Open that a lot of people messaged me about, and this is what I want to finish the video on, is a little bit of curiosity point. And that is that if any of you watched it, you probably noticed that a number of the Japanese players were wearing their club kit or personal attire, and also that even when it was Japan versus Japan, there were coaches in the coaching chairs. Naturally, of course, people were asking me about this, and so, being the curious person I am, I tried to find out, and I think I have the answer, and it's quite a simple one. If you cast your mind back just a couple of months, you might remember that there was a story where the Japanese national training camps before the Olympic Games were cancelled, with the big reason being to do with funding. Money, basically. And why this was happening was because just previously there was a huge story breaking about money embezzlement and misappropriating of funds, etc. I can't remember exactly who was involved, but it heavily affected the Nippon Badminton Association. This situation has obviously affected the financial situation of the NBA, and as a result, I don't think they have the funding to send their players to all these tournaments. And so the reason why the players are wearing their club kit is because it's the clubs that are funding the tournaments. This would also explain why Park Ju-bong wasn't at the tournament, or that even when it was Japan versus Japan, it was still coaches involved. So yeah, that isn't a 100% confirmed story, but that kind of answer does kind of ring true with me. It makes sense. And if I'm honest, I really do hope that the Nippon Badminton Association can sort this out, because it might affect players further down the line. But anyway, okay, I think that's enough. I think I'm going to call that as a wrap on episode 2 of Beckman's Breakdown. I hope you enjoyed this episode. There's definitely plenty of food for thought, with kind of 3 main things that I've kind of put to you to discuss, 3 main things that maybe the BWF can change. Players and their necessity to enter and play all those tournaments, injury timeouts, and whether we need VAR for more things than just line calls. So as always, I would love to see your comments and thoughts on this as well as everything else. Please keep it respectful. I know these topics can get everyone a little bit heated, so I just hope that we can kind of keep it civil. There's now a little break until the next run of World Tour events, which are going to be the European leg, and of course when that happens I'll be here to bring you my own Beckman's breakdown. So until then, see you later.